Okay. Welcome everybody to the ISOC Foundation Board of Trustees meetings for November 2021. Of the foundation trustees, we are missing two at the moment, Maimuna and Paul. We hope that they'll be able to join us later in the meeting. At the start of the meeting, it's traditional to ask if anybody has any declarations of conflicts for the meeting. Is there any declaration of conflict for today's meeting? Okay, hearing none, it looks like we can go straight into our agenda, which begins with the Executive Director's look back at 2021.
Okay, it's easier to make a presentation when you're not on mute. My name is Sarah Armstrong. For those who don't know me, I'm the Executive Director of the Internet Society Foundation, and I'm thrilled to be here. We have so much to share this morning. We have quite a few things to go over on our agenda to talk about for the foundation, and we're going to start with a looking back at 2021. Why is this important to start with this? Well, this is important because when we think about where we're going to go in 2022, we need to know what we did in 2021. I know it's not quite over yet, so there may be some updates. And in fact, this presentation was prepared a little bit ago, so we even have some changes since then. But the good news is it's been a fabulous year for the Internet Society Foundation. It is our second operational year. 2020 was our first, and so 2022 will be our third. And later I'll be talking about that. So I'd like to go ahead and give us the agenda. Thank you, Kevin, for advancing the slides. I appreciate it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is something you've heard me talk about before. It's called testing, learning, and adapting. And the idea is we're a startup. So there's no way we're going to get everything right away. Everybody knows. I think almost everyone on this board has probably had some experience with startups. And you know that the big thing is that you want to try things. And you have confidence based on research that's been done, the Bridgespan documents, the wonderful board input you've gotten, the things you've learned from the community and from other people as you've walked around and been around. So you have confidence that you're trying great things, but you have to test them and you have to learn from them and adapt. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the funding areas of this year, 2021. Then we'll talk about the objectives that we tried to achieve this year in 2021 and how much progress we've made to date. And as I said, I know there's a bit more left in the year, but we have so much to report for what we've done so far. And then I'll take you through the program highlights. So as you know, we have a number of different program areas at the Internet Society Foundation, and we are going to share information about each. So Kevin, next slide, please. So testing, learning, and adapting. This was an amazing second operational year. We really, really learned a lot, and we did so many things that were new compared to what we did in 2020. That there was a lot of learning. And in some cases, the adaptations to which I refer had to do with what we learned from our 2020 work. So each year we're going to build on our lessons and we're going to make sure that what we're doing is really smart. And it's going to be, based on experience, and it's going to be wonderful. So we're doing this both on our operational side as well as our program side, because as you know, the foundation has an operations function as well as a program area function. Next slide, please. So speaking of program area function, these are the 5 program areas for the Internet Society Foundation. RARE has actually 2 components to it, and as you know, Beyond the Net does as well, because we have both small and large grants. So I'm not going to take you through the details of each of the programs, but what I want to point out here on this graphic is how important it is that we have our logo in the middle. And it's because we want to do cross portfolio, we want to do cross program work as much as we can, having the grantees not only learn from us, but from each other. And the other thing I want to point out here is, of course, in addition to the program areas, we will continue to fund IGF nationals, regionals, as well as the global. In fact, we'll be funding the global that starts in, I think 2 weeks, it's early December. And then we'll continue to fund the IETF LLC. This is a board-directed funding that we have established and we will continue to do. We have a commitment with them for several years and we will help support them by providing funding each year. So that, as well as the IGF, is going to continue along with the program areas. Next slide, please. What did we want to accomplish in 2021? So I'm not going to read the words on the slide because that's not my style. I would prefer they're up there. People can see them. We wanted to commit funding. We wanted to make sure we promoted what we were doing so that we could get not only recognition of our work, but very importantly, higher quality applicants as a result of the communications that we did. We wanted to establish a community of grantees, and this is something I referred to earlier, how important it is when we look at that graphic of those different programs that we are making sure that those grantees are really feeling like they're part of a community. And finally, we said, we're going to launch 2 new program areas. Why not? 2021, let's go ahead and just get it all out there. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So we achieved the objectives. It's not even over yet. We've already not only achieved, but in some cases exceeded. So this slide right here, the graphic, demonstrates to you what we did. We have committed almost $8 million this year to different programs, and we're not even done yet. We also have look at the social media numbers, how many followers we have. Our numbers for newsletter are high. Look at our website view, 96,000. When we say connect as one of our objectives, we have been so busy connecting our grantees with each other, just making sure that everybody has an opportunity to learn from each other. In some cases, we'll put together a call for co-collaboration. We may have 2 grantees who have similar ideas and we encourage them perhaps to work together. We've been able to do so much connecting this year and it feels so good and it matters to them. And then we did in fact launch those 2 programs that we said we were going to, both resiliency and BOLT. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read this list, but this is important to see that in addition to all of that stuff that you just saw on that graphic, we also accomplished all of these things that you see on, I'm sorry, somebody's perhaps be on mute. Thank you. Thanks very much. So you can see here a list of other things that we completed. Again, not reading each one, but you can see that we were busy and very, very productive. And I do want to call attention to the second to last bullet here. This training curriculum is a very important part of our work. We developed a training curriculum for how to improve applications and how to improve the work that you do, particularly trying to measure the results that you're getting with the funding from us. So this year in 2021, we took what was a PDF format on the web and we turned it into an interactive, very fun, spirited, great energy training. And it is now it's accessible for both low and high bandwidth. And what's really great is we have over 400 people having taken this course. So we know people are using it. And we're going to continue to make sure that it's available. And we may be making some changes in 2022 to make it even more what people need. Next slide, please. Thank you, Kevin. So I'm now going to give you the highlights from the different program areas in 2021. Next slide, please. The first one I want to talk about is emergency response COVID-19. For those of you who were part of the board in 2020, you'll recall that there was a time where you got an email from me that said, you know what, it's COVID and COVID requires more internet. So the board was kind enough to transfer funding from one place to another. And we created a brand new program that of course was not in our portfolio because, well, I don't know about you, but I sure as heck didn't expect COVID was coming. And I certainly didn't realize how important the internet was going to become as a result of this pandemic. But when it showed it, when I saw it, I said to the board, we have to do something. So in 2020, we launched this. Now, why am I talking about a 2020 effort in a 2021 look back? It's because the grants that we gave continued into 2021. And what was fabulous is they also finished because they were year-long grants. And I'm just showing you here in some of the bullets that some of the outcomes that we had as a result. Next slide, please. These are the 4 organizations to which we provided funding in 2020, which finished in 2021. Next slide, please. And these are the things that we learned. And we actually put together, and it's on our website, and I encourage you all to look for it. And I can also send you the link if that's easier. We put together a full report because this is the first time we had a start and a finish of a program. And we wanted to look at lessons learned, things that were accomplished. And of course, we started the paragraph in the first part of the document about how this was not originally intended for us to do, but we did it and we were very successful. So I encourage you to see that. And you can see some of the learnings. One of the big learnings was that connectivity really was what we wanted to focus on. So when we relaunched this program to develop a cohort for 2021, we had the organizations just focus on connectivity. So we have organizations, I don't have a slide for that second cohort, but we're working with Syracuse University that's doing an internet backpack. We're working with people-centered internet, addressing the digital divide in Native American communities across North America. We're working with United Way Netherlands with a really clever thing. So again, these are stories all on our website that I encourage you to find. Next slide, please. In addition to ER COVID-19, as part of the RARE program, and RARE stands for Resiliency and Responding to Emergencies. I came up with that acronym because I thought, wouldn't it be nice if these things were rare? But right now, with climate change and resiliency, there's a lot of work to be done. Originally, the Bridgespan documents called this disaster. And the idea there was to do something to help communities prepare better. It's no longer an if a storm is going to hit, or if an earthquake might happen, or if a cyclone might happen. There's no if anymore because of climate change. It's a when. So what we decided to do here was that we wanted to help build these communities to help them be better prepared for when that disaster strikes. So we are doing this in a lot of countries, as you can see. We have 3 organizations with which we're working. And what's really important is what we're testing here is we are testing the idea of our Internet Society chapters working with these organizations. So this is a new concept. And what we did is we reached out to the chapters first and talked to them about how they felt. And now we have these amazing program collaborations that are happening. And just quickly to list the countries in which we're working: El Salvador, Kenya, Pacific Islands, Puerto Rico, Guatemala, Japan, Nicaragua, Ghana, Philippines, Gambia, Jamaica, Mauritius, and Haiti. So just so you know, the resiliency program is all over the place, and we will of course continue that in 2022, and you'll hear from me about that later. But this was a huge win for us to get this off the ground and do the chapter collaboration in 2021. Next slide, please. Skills. This is a program you've heard about before, so I won't spend a ton of time on this. As you know, skills is not actually about connectivity. In this case, it's about digital literacy skills. We want to make sure that those who are connected understand how best to benefit from the connection that they have. So we've been working in 3 countries: Bangladesh, Colombia, and Senegal. We absolutely chose countries that were in need, and we've had some great success. We not only did a cohort in 2020, but we also just awarded a cohort for 2021. So you'll be seeing those grants announced by in our news feed very, very soon. So Kevin, next slide, please. These are the grantees you'll hear about. So in Colombia, we have 3 organizations. In Senegal, we have 3 organizations. And again, in Bangladesh, we have 3 organizations for 2021. Next slide, please. Research. Okay, so I've talked about emergency response. I've talked about resiliency. I've talked about skills. Research, again, is a program about which you've heard before. And I want to let you know that we are now into our 3rd round, what we call our 3rd cohort of research grantees. And we are awarding right now to 6 additional organizations. So in 2021, we actually made 2 sets of awards for research. And they are within 4 thematic areas: greening the internet economy, a trustworthy internet, and decolonizing the internet. Next slide, please. This is a very long list, but these are the 18 grantees for the research program for now as of 2021, some of which, as I mentioned, were awarded in 2020 and will of course continue this in 2022. Next slide, please. Beyond the Net, great program. We love working with the chapters. We've spent a lot of time with webinars, one-on-one phone calls, really trying to get a better understanding of what chapters are needing and how we can help them. So we've awarded small grants and large grants. Since this slide was developed, we've actually awarded a few more. But what's really important is that we also are learning more about the chapters. And our thought is probably we'll be making some adjustments to the program in 2022, because we really learned a lot in 2021 about what the chapters need through a great survey that we've done. And we'll be developing a response to that and making sure that we are doing what the chapters need us to do for them to be successful. Next slide, please. These are just some really quick examples. I'm not going to read them.
So Mohammed, I apologize, but it appears your screen reader is reading into the room, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Okay, everybody can still hear me okay? Okay, great. So next slide, please. Bolt, this is a brand new program. This one was originally called Innovation when it came to the Bridgespan documents. And the Bolt program, I called it Bolt because I wanted something that was, bold and strong and different and kind of loud, because this is where we want to see some real creativity. And it stands for Building Opportunities Leveraging Technology. But what's unique about this is it's really seriously focused on empowering teams of people, creatives, technologists, researchers, social cultural workers, looking to design pilots that are really innovative about connecting communities. So we'll be awarding 4 grants of up to $200,000 each by the end of this year. This program was just recently launched, and right now the applications are with what we call the Independent Program Review Committee. You'll recall that the foundation has outside experts who review our applications to make recommendations of who to fund. So we're in that stage right now. We have a phone call with them next week to get their recommendations. So I'm afraid I can't tell you anything about the applicants because I don't know yet who's going to be awarded. So I'm just going to ask you to look out for the announcement for when we finally pull that off, and we will be committing funding for Bolt in 2021. Next slide, please. This is my last slide for 2021. And this is my slide where I just want to say, I am so proud of the work that we have done. I'm feeling so good about the direction of the foundation. I'm thanking the board right now for the support that you have provided throughout the 2021 year and even today and the discussion that we'll have. But I also cannot end this presentation without talking about how amazing the team is that is working on this work. You've met some of the members. Connie, of course, Kendig, I've asked her to join us today. She does a lot of work with me on a lot of different things, but we have amazing program officers, program staff, people working in monitoring and evaluation and communications. This team is amazing. Yes, we have faced challenges, but we have overcome them. And as a result, we are really starting to see a foundation form about which we are extremely proud. And with that, I'll end my presentation and take questions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And let me start by saying the board realizes that a more challenging set of circumstances as your first year or second year out in the world couldn't really be imagined with a worldwide pandemic, and attempting to make the connections that you need to make and to engage in the work that you need to engage in with so many avenues of cooperation and collaboration closed off. We understand that that's been challenging, and we're certainly looking at the results in awe that you've been able to accomplish what you have with those challenges in place. And I see Mike is in queue. Mike.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Sarah, and thank the foundation for the work in promoting connectivity in a time when we know that climate change is going to be disruptive, and in which connectivity is not only needs to be preserved in the face of the challenges posed by climate change, but also may be part of the solution as we begin to navigate this century. So thank you so much. I think it's really key that is an important priority, and I hope, and my strong belief is that that the Internet Society and the Internet Foundation continue to make it a priority. Thanks.
Absolutely, Mike. Absolutely. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Mike. We have Mohammed Shabir and then Luis in queue. Shabir.
Hey, Mohammed.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you very much for this wonderful briefing, as well as for sharing the accessible presentations with me. Just two quick questions. One is the RARE program that you talk about, the wonderful work that you foundation has been doing with a lot of different countries. So in how many of these countries the foundation has received the consent from ISOC chapters, or is this just the community you are working with?
So to answer that question, I think you have two, but I'll answer that first one for you first. So what we did, Mohammed, is we reached out to the chapters first before we even started the program. And we explained to them that our hope was that we could see a collaboration between the chapters who know these communities so well with bigger organizations. So we were in touch with the chapters and had calls with all of them before we even got into launching the resiliency program. So they're all on board. In fact, we just recently hosted, because we're really big on hosting phone calls, we did a launch for the resiliency program so that the chapters could attend, as well as the organizations with which they'll be working.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick suggestion, the board program that you have just talked about, I believe that the applicants and the requirements are being set up, but I would really appreciate if you can add the accessibility for people with disabilities in provisions into that. And if the organizations that Internet Society Foundation will be working with, if they can find and incorporate some of the provisions or accessibility provisions in their programs, that would really be appreciable.
Okay, thank you. Very, very good recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Thank you, Sarah, for this report. And I agree very much with this idea where you started. If we look back into 2021, we are most likely to have a very successful 2022, which I agree totally in that view. I'm just wondering about the skills project. Yes. What is the future for skills next year? Yes. Is it going to grow? Is it going to stay about the same? Or what is your vision about skills, which is really innovative for the foundation and for the Internet Society?
So Luis, you're getting into my next presentation by asking me that question, because I'm going to be sharing that information, but I'll give everybody a sneak peek because I don't want to not answer your question. So the idea is that we'll continue to work in those 3 countries, but when we design skills, the thought was that we would always expand in the regions. So what we're doing now is we're doing research in the different regions, in LAC, in Asia Pacific, and in Africa, and we will choose a second country. So in 2022, we'll continue to work in the countries in which we are currently working, but then we will add 3 additional countries. So our vision for skills is to grow it in the regions, but to continue to answer your question further, focusing on digital literacy skills and teaching people the benefits of being connected.
Thanks.
And so you'll hear me say that again in 2022's presentation.
Well, thank you
Very much.
for both the base presentation and for the preview. At the moment, I think the way the agenda is structured, we have the financial update first and then the presentation of the action plan.
Yeah. Mhm.
Say, would you like to do the financial update now?
Sure, thanks, Ted. Kevin, should I use my own? Oh, thank you. Good, good. As Sarah explained, she explained the successes for the third quarter from the program perspective. Now I'll be presenting the financial results for foundations through the end of September. So similar to what Sarah said, some of these numbers are outdated. So we have some updates for October and November for you. Next slide, thank you. Since the detailed financial results reports were already shared with you previously, I'll be focusing on reviewing some of the key highlights with you today. Through the end of third quarter, the revenue is higher than the budget by about 3 million, which is mainly due to receiving additional excess fund from PIR. And as you recall, that happened in the second quarter. Total expenses were lower by about 238,000 compared to the budget. And majority of that underspend came from personnel. And that was also expected because Sarah was able to find some of the lower cost personnel for the open positions. So we were able to have some savings in the personnel budget. In September, Foundation's investment portfolio actually experienced a downturn. So they reported about 2.2 million of net losses. However, the market bounced back in month of September, and we were able to recover most of that in month of October. Even with reporting the net loss in September, through the end of September, the investment portfolio reported a net gain of 5.5 million. Next slide, please, Kevin. This is the snapshot of the board designated fund. And this is where you will find some discrepancy to what Sarah had reported. Because what we're reporting, funds used of 3.2 million and pending payout, add that up, does not tie out to 7.9 million that she mentioned that had been committed, because there have been large chunk of funding that was committed in month of October and November already. So at the end of September, net of all the committed awards, the full board designated fund is reporting about 5.6 million balances. Next slide, please, Kevin. This is just a different presentation of all of our expenses putting together to give you a general sense of where we spend our expenses. So you will see about 69% of our total expenses are spent for direct support. These are grant expenses going directly to our grantees. And about 17% of our total expenses are spent for program-related activities. And only about 14% are spent in general and management. This is, again, just high-level allocation method to give you a general sense. So for actual audit purposes, we do a detailed allocation and review what's in the general management and make sure that we allocate these accurately for the audit. Next slide, please. Next one, this slide is a presentation of our balance sheet. So show you what's in our asset as well as our liability and net assets. So we have pretty healthy, foundation has pretty healthy balances between the net asset and liabilities. In commercial world, it would be something similar to debt to equity ratio. So if we consider that in general terms, 0.5 to 1.5 is considered to be good ratio to have for foundation. Currently, as of September 30th, it has over 15. So it's beyond healthy ratio for the organization. Next slide. This is cash forecast for at the end of the year for 2021. We started up on September 30th with 118 million, with anticipated cash received from PIR and anticipated cash going out for operations and grants. We expect to stay around the same at the end of the year, about 118. But given the fact that we don't factor in the investment activities into our forecast, most likely our actual cash balances will be different at the end of the year. That's it, Kevin. This was the end of the financial presentation.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there questions from the board? Well, I did want to say thank you for our exchange off camera about starting to track the inflationary effect on both expenses and potential asset inflation. I think that'll be useful for successive boards just to be able to get both the baseline and some view of that, depending on what's going on in the world with respect to inflation. So thank you for that commitment. Were there other questions? Okay, it sounds like there are none. I appreciate once again both the report and your presentation. Thanks again. Our next item on the agenda is the 2022 action plan, and Sarah will be taking us through that.
Ted, that's in a closed session, I believe, so we'll have to move Zoom rooms.
The action plan presentation?
It's actually listed in the agenda as in the open to observers, so we can move it to closed if you believe it ought to be there, but I don't think it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken. I'm thinking of the next session. Sorry.
No problem. Sarah, back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ted. I think Kevin will go ahead and pull the slides out, please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, it's time to talk about 2022, which I have to say, I cannot believe it's going to be 2022. I recently was doing a fitness class on video and they were all saying the same thing. How did we get here so fast? Especially considering, as Ted referenced earlier, just how challenging world life has been. But boy, time is moving and we are now moving to 2022. 2022 for the Internet Society Foundation is our third operational year. And as I just finished discussing with you about 2021, it will build on the lessons that we learned in our second operational year. We really feel as though we have done an amazing job of learning and therefore applying those learnings as we develop the action plan for this coming year. So I'm really excited to share with you how it is that we would like to move forward as the Internet Society Foundation in our third operational year. Next slide, please. So here's the agenda. I just did the introduction, and so we're done with that part. I know you guys know the vision and the mission, but I'm going to remind you of it because I always just feel like it's great to put it out there and just have it in our heads as we look about where we're going to go forward. There is in the deck, as well as in the document I sent you for 2022, some information about 2021 successes. Why? Because we want to show what we're building on. I will, however, Kevin, have us just skip through those slides. We don't need to do that information again. I just presented it. We'll talk about what our test, learn, adapt approach is for 2022, and then the outlook, not just on the different funding areas and the details of where we want to go, including what we're going to do with skills, but also what we're going to do with M&E, with operations, with communications, with engaging our grantees. And of course, we'll talk about our success measures and the team that we would like to have put together for 2022 in order to do all of the things that we want to do. Next slide, please. So this, again, just a reminder, you've seen this before. The internet is for everyone. It's the same as what the Internet Society has, and we love it and we believe in it. Next slide, please. Our mission is a bit different than the Internet Society's mission. Not a lot, it's similar. It's all about really making sure that people get connected and understand the benefits of being connected. But what I just love to underscore in this line here is unlock the internet's potential to tackle the world's evolving challenges. I was able to listen to the recording that you all did of the meeting, the board call on Wednesday, to listen to why people were part of the Internet Society. And I think, Ted, you used putting your shoulder against the wheel, I think was the phrase, and why people were doing that. And there was so much talk about doing good and humanness and the whole, I mean, I wrote down the things, the building allies, you know, all these kinds of things. And that is not only what the Internet Society is about, it's also what the Internet Society Foundation is all about. Next slide, please. These are our values. Now, we share the values that the Internet Society shares in terms of collaboration and respect and all of those things. The values that you see on this slide are really about how we conduct our business with the people with whom we work outside the organization. We want to make sure that what we do is be bold. We definitely want to be inclusive, which means we may need to change some of our practices and the ways in which we do things. We also are committed, absolutely committed to all of the things that we're doing, to the programs that we're launching, to the people that we're working with. And this I want to reinforce with them every single day when we work with them. And of course, integrity, that is so critical. And the fact that we have an independent panel that reviews our grants, we think that's really important that we have that. We have other things in place to make sure that we're very, very transparent about the work that we do. And that to me says integrity. Next slide, please. So what does this look like? Well, it looks like listening and learning. It looks like making sure that we adapt our processes to be more inclusive. These are the things that we're going to do in 2022. We're in good shape in 2021, but we know we can make improvements. So we have no problem admitting that. We want to update our application and reporting practices. We're trying new and different things in terms of how people provide reports, because as most of you know, the way in which we do these grants is once an application has been approved, we go through a process of making sure that they are a 501c3 or equivalent. And once we get that, we do a grant agreement. And then once that happens, we can give a first payment. But we sure as heck don't give a second payment until we're sure that what they're doing is what they said they were going to do. But we don't want to make the reporting process so burdensome that they just hate the idea of having to do it, because we need it. We have to have it. So we're playing with different ideas of possibly doing some video reporting as opposed to always doing it in writing. Audio reporting, other kinds of verbal check-ins, this kind of thing. So these are just things that we want to play with in 2022 to see if we can find that our grantees are happy. It's not like we're getting complaints, but we're just constantly thinking about making sure that we're responding and making sure that they don't feel like they're overburdened because they've got enough work to do with the money that we're providing them. And finally, I want to underscore that we are really focused on underserved and unserved populations. We specifically did not choose the word the global South. And the reason is because we work in the global North. As everybody here knows, there are issues in the global North, rural America, Brooklyn, my gosh, you know, Beyond the Net did an amazing mesh project in Brooklyn. So there are a lot of places that don't necessarily fit in the global South. So what we decided is we would call our target audience, for our grantees, the underserved, or even in some cases, unserved populations. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip these, Kevin, because we already talked about them. So go ahead and go through, see all those. Okay, so stop here. Oh, sorry. I just want to mention for test, learn, and adapt, we're going to continue to do it. We're going to continue to respond to the learnings. This will always be part of who we are. Now, next slide, please. It's time for more detail on 2022 for the Internet Society Foundation. Next slide. So the first thing I want to share with you are our objectives. And you can see we have 5 here. They have a lot of different areas to cover. The first is funding, at least 11 million, but we're actually hoping it will be more, because as you saw, what we did in 2021 thus far was we exceeded what we were originally planning to do. We want to, again, this talks about the organizations that are working with underserved and unserved. I would love to see more of our funding go to organizations that are actually located in the countries in which they are working. I have no problem with these wonderful North American-based organizations who we fund and who work in countries around the world, because I'll talk to you in a second about our footprint. I think that's fine, but that's not all I want to do. I love the idea of building the capacity of local organizations. So for example, in Bangladesh, in Senegal, and in Colombia right now with skills, those are all local organizations. So we want to continue to see that happen to the best degree that we can. Obviously, it's not always going to be that way. There may be people on the independent program review committee who feel an American or a North America-based organization should get the funding, but our hope is that we'll increase the number of those who are working in the countries in which they are located in the countries in which they work. Testing our evaluation framework, we're really going to jack up on monitoring and evaluation. We're ready at this point now that we've learned a lot about how to evaluate, and I'm going to talk about that specifically. Obviously, we want to continue to evolve our systems, our ecosystem to streamline efficiencies, and this I referenced earlier when it talks about how we can make sure the grantees are less burdened. And then we're never going to stop communicating, because communicating about who we are is extremely important. And wait, I see Ted has a question. Okay, let me stop there and take Ted's question.
No, actually, I decided it fit later in the presentation, so I took my hand down. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just saw it come up in the chat. Okay, next slide, please. So our footprints, you can see we're growing, we're getting out there, and with some of the new grantees that we are going to be providing funding for in the end of the year, this will be probably a little bit of a different map. But just so you know, we are funding projects in 37 countries, as well as 16 regionally focused projects covering 6 different regions. There are also an additional 10 projects with a global scope. So we are very proud, because the Internet Society Foundation, just like the Internet Society, as we were speaking about when we were talking about time zones, we're a global organization. We need to be working in as many places as we can, because there are so many needs in so many countries. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. We've already talked about it. These are the 5 program areas. They'll continue in 2022 as they were in 2021 in terms of we're going to do these, but the way in which they look for next year could be a bit different. So we will continue to do this. And of course, as we've talked about, we'll continue with IGF and IETF as board directed. And we will continue to provide money so that they will continue to be doing what they are hoping to do and want to do and need to do. And we are very dedicated to them. So next slide, please. This has too many words on it, and I recognize that. And yet it seemed like a really good way to just put all the programs out there so you can see what it is that we're thinking of doing, of changing in terms of the programs, because all 5 areas are in fact going to have some minor changes, or in some case even major changes. So for example, Beyond the Net on the far left side, we want to give a little more money. We have chapters who really feel, even on the small side, that they could handle more money and do more work. And in fact, in some cases, they're wondering if we might extend the length of time, because Beyond the Net Smalls are 6 months only. And maybe if we give them 5,000 instead of 3,500 as a grant, maybe they can do more. In the large area, we actually want to take it up to as much as 50,000. Why? Because during 2021, we started to recognize that chapters have a lot of potential and that there are a lot of things that they can do. Now, not all chapters they'll admit this, not all chapters are capable of managing $50,000. But as you know, we have Zimbabwe who's working on a research project, and that's nearly 80,000. So it just goes to show you that there is potential out there with chapters to grow their footprint. And then, of course, with Beyond the Net, we'll be using the survey to do what other adjustments that we need to do. And we're analyzing the survey as we speak. Skills, well, we've talked about this. So I'll just do this real quickly. So we're going to expand. We're going to expand in the region. As you can see, we're doing research to get some additional countries. And we're also talking about increasing the amount of money that we give for this program. Research will continue with the same areas that we have now, the same 4 that I shared with you in the look back of 2021. And then we're also looking at possibly trying to fund more individual grantees. As you saw, it was a long list. It was a list of 18. But as you saw in the previous presentation, we had just 4 individuals, so out of 18. So we're thinking maybe we can try to streamline and target individuals. So that's something we're thinking about for 2022. For RARE, again, a reminder, it has 2 components: emergency response and resiliency. We're going to continue these programs. We will do what we can to learn from what we did in 2021 to make sure that we do what we need to do in 2022. I do not know right now if emergency response will again focus on COVID. However, as you saw in the narrative of the action plan, we all feel like it's likely. It's not gone. There are still needs as a result. Some of the countries, as we know, are seeing surges. We don't know what's going to happen even in first quarter for 2022. Nobody does. But we're thinking if it's still a huge issue and it's causing problems with kids getting educated and other types of things like this, that we'll get the connectivity to these communities. And then with resiliency, we are going to be learning from this year on how it went with the chapters being hooked up together with the big organizations, and how did it go? How is it going actually? Because in 2022, they're all going to be active programs. So we'll take the learnings from the beginning. We're going to be doing surveys with the chapters. We're going to be doing surveys with the organizations with which the chapters are working to be sure that we understand how it's going. Are there things we need to change? And so all that we will learn from, and then we'll launch a second cohort of resiliency grantees for 2022. And finally, we want to continue BOLT. This is the one we're very excited about. We want to increase the amount of funding. We want to continue to fund these teams that I talked about in the last presentation, and also considering putting a grant request out for an organization who can really help work with cohesively pulling the teams together and making sure that we're all learning from each other properly. So next slide, please, Kevin. Thank you. So I've talked so far about objectives, and I've talked about all the different program areas. But it's not all we do. We don't just do programs. What we do is we support the programs through different operational functions. Monitoring and evaluation is hugely important. When I first took this job, the board made it extremely clear to me that they wanted to know how successful we were with the funding we were giving. What are the results that we're getting? Well, we've been looking this year on the project level. And when you read the emergency response COVID-19 program report to which I referred earlier, you'll see some of the things that we learned from on the M&E side. But we also need to do a better job for program evaluation. So how is Beyond the Net as a program, not just individual grantees? How is RARE as a program? How is BOLT as a program, et cetera? So I'm working with our wonderful monitoring and evaluation manager, for us to be able to put together learning questions that make sense to help us understand the value of the program. And then ultimately to respond to the original request, how is the foundation doing? So we need to be looking, since we'll be in our third operational year, we'll have a lot of data with which to work. How is the foundation doing in terms of accomplishing what we thought we wanted to do from the time the foundation was formed? Next slide, please. We have a terrific communications manager. She has gone ahead and developed this slide for us, and that is what she wants to accomplish in communications. Obviously, we want to do more. We definitely want to do more. For one thing, we're going to have a lot more to talk about because we're in our third year and we have more grantees and we have more to report and more to talk about. So as you know, our followers on social media are high, our newsletter subscriptions are high, our website views are high. We want it to be better. And I do want to make a point right here on how hard we have worked on making sure our website is accessible. So we've done a lot of work this year to make sure, and Mohammed has given me some names of people who we are going to work with to have them just be testing it for us and make sure that they feel like it's really covering everything it needs to cover. And then we'll make any adjustments as needed. So thank you, Mohammed, for giving me those names. And I've written to them and look forward to hopefully getting together with them soon and taking them through our site and making sure that they feel it is as accessible as possible. Next slide, please. Operations. Okay, so monitoring, evaluation, communications, and then there's operations. The operations team is run by Connie, and Connie is on this call because Connie does an amazing amount of work, as does every member of the team. But specifically in 2021, which will influence 2022, she and I worked together with SAY very, very closely on developing the 5-year forecast. You all have already seen that. I'm not going to go into detail. You all know what we presented earlier. I think it was in September. Then you had asked us to take the 5-year forecast and look out and see where we wanted to be in 2030. So we did that. And that again was presented to you, I believe, in October. So both of those are completed, and everyone supported the direction in which we're going. And just the 3 bullets that you see on this slide, the bottom 3 bullets, I apologize. The sub bullets, actually, we are going to increase grant making substantially, as you saw in our objectives. The organization is going to stay lean. I do not have a vision of a 100-person foundation. That is not what this is all about. As you recall, when you read our 5-year forecast and looked at our 2030 plan, we are looking at topping out at something like 20 people. So this is not a foundation that's going to turn into some huge thing, but be very lean and very, very productive. And because we apparently are really good at hiring smart, hardworking people, I know we're going to be able to do this. And finally, you already know this, we're establishing a quasi-endowment for $50 million, and this will take place in 2022. This is something we're going to be working on with Goldman Sachs, talking about investment strategies, and we'll be getting back to people with some more information on that. Next slide, please. In addition to all the financial stuff that operations has done with me, they also obviously are working on systems. We have a lot of systems that we're looking at, not just our grants management system, but we of course are going to have to also work with ISOC. As you'll hear from Andrew, when it comes to 2022, they're looking at getting a brand new AMS, and they're working right now on finding a vendor. So once that happens, we're going to need to integrate with that. So that's one of the things, for example, operations will be focused on in 2022. But also, again, going back to the point I made earlier, how can we be sure that our processes are refined to demonstrate our commitment to equitable processes? How can we be sure that we are streamlining existing processes for not just the staff, but obviously the grantees, and you know who else? Our reviewers, because they're in flux. That's where they go to do their evaluations of the applications. So we want to make sure our systems are friendly and productive, and yet give us the information we have to have. Next slide, please. We are, as I've mentioned, continuing to build our grantee community. This is a draft calendar of the types of things that we would like to do in 2022. I immediately want to say, I don't know if we're traveling. Nobody knows if we're traveling. And as you've seen in the budget, we have a pool, just like Internet Society has a pool. It's a travel pool pulled out, pushed over here to be determined. The pool that we have is not for a bunch of conference going. It's to bring grantees together. And what we're thinking about is not just grantees of the same program, but maybe even cross-portfolio grantee get-togethers. If we have to do them virtually, we'll do them virtually. We've been doing that anyway. Ted, you have a hand?
Thanks very much. There were 2 points I wanted to make just quickly connected to this. And one is really, I encourage you to do them cross-program as soon as it makes sense to you. I think it's really important to give an opportunity for the different programs to demonstrate their interactions. And I'm just pulling out one of the ones you've already mentioned in the research side. One of your themes is decolonization. And I think that that's a theme that might resonate with several of the other types of both skills and resiliency work, and having those researchers and having the folks in the different grant pools able to talk to each other, share not just their learning about how to effectively administer the grants or do their work, but just more generally build a community among them, I think would be very valuable for the foundation, for the society, and for the internet. I do want to ask you, though, kind of a logistical question here, especially if we're going to try and get folks to focus grant making in organizations which are based in the territories which are being served. Obviously, the native languages of the grantees is going to vary a good bit more.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure it varies a good bit now, but thinking about what support we might need to offer to make sure that you can build a community across language boundaries. This is non-trivial, right? I mean, a lot of people have tried this. And I was wondering if you had examples in mind from other foundations that have done something similar that you felt you'd be able to bring in and make a success here.
So first of all, we do have now, Connie and her team are working on a multilingual system in Flux, but it is limited to French, English, and Spanish. So our grant, when we go into Flux, eventually those who speak those 3 languages will have an easier time. But your point is very well taken. I will say what we did this year in Bangladesh, because obviously we have French and Spanish in Africa and in Colombia. But in Bangladesh, we hired somebody who could help us talk with the grantees. And I even actually attended a class that they were conducting, one of our grantees, and it was all, in Bangladesh, but what they did was made sure we had interpreters. So what we're hoping, Ted, is to find ways to make sure that we can, and this is why it's in the budget as professional services, ways that we can do more of that, as you know, because English and Spanish and French are not enough when you look across the world. I have yet to have a chance to go and explore other foundations who have done this kind of work, but I love the recommendation that you're making, because one of the things we do is we learn from other foundations. As I think I've mentioned before, we're members of Council on Foundation, Peak Grant Making. We're a member of AGAG, which is an African organization that's all about African foundations. We're a member of AVPN, which is also a Asia Pacific organization for foundations. We're joining another one that's for LAC next year. So we have a network, Ted, from whom we can learn about these things. And since this is our plan for 2022, thank you for raising it. And I will tell you that that's the way in which I'm going to get smarter about this.
Well, thank you very much. And I would encourage you to consider, if that doesn't produce results in 2022, things of success, maybe a directed research, a grant on that topic might be useful in some later year, because it's obviously something where not just this part of the Internet Society, but the Internet Society as a whole would benefit. So it definitely, if you have lessons learned, sharing them across the rest of the society would be valuable as well. And now we have 3 people in queue.
I see that. Yes. I forget who went first.
I think it was Pepper, Luis, and then Mohammed. Pepper?
Thank you. And actually, Ted, I was going to suggest a variation of what you just suggested. I think, there's a huge amount of work being done now in real-time translation in a number of places. And I would I think it's not unrealistic to think that within 5 years, that is going to be very standard as features across what we're doing now, for example, in Zoom. The question is, how can that be accelerated? I think that, given the work the foundation's doing, it also is very directly related to the mission of the Internet Society. But I would be very supportive of not only working with in terms of a future research project, but also within some of the other activities to stimulate this work and to accelerate it. And one thing that we may want to think about is, as in the past, for example, as in the resilience or the disaster relief programs and responding to COVID, we may actually want to put out a call for proposals as part of the foundation's work to accelerate the work that's already being done, so that it's not 5 years that it's standard, but 2 years that this kind of real-time translation becomes standard into multiple languages. I think this is a great point, Ted, that you've raised. And thank you, sir.
And I absolutely agree, Pepper. So it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. And so the way in which we'll go about it will keep you informed. But that is definitely one option, to put out a request for proposals on something like that specifically. And that's the kind of thing that we would use our professional services line item in our budget for.
Thank you. Luis?
Yes, thank you, Ted. Thank you, Sarah, for this very exciting presentation. And one thing I like very much is increasing the amount of the Beyond the Net grants for the chapters. As you say, it's a challenge for some chapters to manage these Beyond the Net. And I will suggest that there should be more, let's say, companion with the chapters to improve their managing capabilities, right? In a sense that they do not feel audited, but they feel with a companion at the foundation in order to have better management of the resources. Yes, and the other thing that I found in your presentation is about the research. Yes, and you are targeting to improve research in those countries which normally are not very prone to research. And as an objective, I find it a great objective, but it needs also a process to develop these researchers, right? Because let's say many countries in Latin America expend less than 0.2% of their gross national income in research. So it's really, these are societies where research is not important in their day-to-day basis. So if we do not take a step into developing research in those countries, we're going to find problems to find these researchers, because they're going to be scarce. Yes, that's so in these plans to go to the regions, maybe you should consider some seminars to develop researchers in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good point. And interestingly enough, I know Pepper will remember this. We had a workshop, Luis, when it was time for us to develop what it was we wanted to do with the research project. And we did talk a lot about the fact that there were certain countries where research was scarce and there just wasn't enough coming out of there. And if we can help to change that, that would be very exciting. So, okay, I know there's another hand. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, Mohammed.
Yes. Thank you, Ted and Robert. They actually have highlighted the translation point, so I'll not talk about that. One thing that I want to talk about the chapter funding is that while you explore the ideas that how to inculcate this beyond the net funding and chapters into the process more, there could also be some of the thought process. I know there have been a lot of discussion earlier to this discussion as well. Some of the chapters face and still face the issues regarding receiving of the grants. Some of them are legal, and I do accept that we cannot bypass those legal requirements. But still, if there is something that can be done, I think discussion needs to be started that what could be the ways with which these problems of the chapters could be resolved.
Yes.
One point. Second point that I would just like to agitate your mind and draw your attention towards is the research project. I would say this is a wonderful project and wonderful opportunity as well. And I would definitely be interested in reading the results when and if whenever they come out.
Okay.
One area that you may want to think about is, and I really loved it, that that you are not just focusing on the global south. It's the unconnected people, and those unconnected people could be in the developed countries, in the developed part of the world, as well as in the developing part. So this is wonderful, and people with disabilities live everywhere.
Yes.
And it's the global international recognized reports that say that these are like 10 to 15% of the population. An interesting idea that could be that in developed countries, there are laws regarding accessibility and they are implemented. And in some part where I live, I do understand that there are laws as well, but some of them, they are not implemented in letter and spirit as they ought to be. When we see the resilience and the implementation part of the policies, this could be one of the interesting research projects that how countries and governments deal with regards to digital accessibility when it comes to for person with disabilities. That when they have the legal requirements placed on them, and when it is made out of the policy just as an obligation or a moral kind of thing. So this could be one of the ideas that your researchers may think about.
Thank you so much. Obviously, it's extremely important audience. And to your point, there are a lot of people out there who have that disability or a number of disabilities. And I would love to be able to do something like what you've just described. So I will keep you posted. I will talk with our research program officer and also just talk with the team about ways in which we might be able to build that in a little bit more.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew. It looks like you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on this issue of the difficulty of some of sending funding to some countries and so on, because I know it comes up a lot, but I want to remind everybody that we really have looked at this on several occasions, and we've spent quite a lot of like lawyer money on finding workarounds, and there isn't really a convenient way to do this, because the problem is not exclusively on the US law side. Many of these laws are controls that are inside the destination country. And so the people who want to receive these funds need to undertake political action within their own countries. It's not really something that we can do very much. India is an example, but there's actually a lot of these, and so it's not something that we can do anything about, because even trying to do something about it would be a violation of that law, right? We are a foreign organization attempting to influence the legal system in those countries. So this is like, there really is something that we need to encourage people who have this complaint to tackle the issues in their domestic politics, because that isn't something we can even start to do.
So Mohammed, it sounds like you might have a reply to this, but I think this is a much more general point because it affects not just this particular aspect of the foundation's work, but foundation and Internet Society work across a number of things. So we might want to take that discussion to a more general part of the meeting. But Mohammed, if you wanted to make a quick response now, that's fine.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Andrew. Yes, I do understand, and this is very interesting that some of the legal requirements that may not just be on part of the United States, but in the countries where the funds actually are to be received. So what I actually want is that the people there know, because most of the time it's the perception that the laws and regulations, they are there. We, as a board of the Internet Society or the foundation, I would not want to come at the wrong side of the law anywhere in any part of the world. But I, at the same time, would want to avoid a perception where the foundation I am affiliated with is being blamed that we are not doing something about that. Yes, if people want to receive funds, it is the responsibility of the foundation and Internet Society that we give them. But as Andrew says, it is also the responsibility of the people who wants to receive funds to do some work. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And Sarah, I think we kind of broke into generalized discussion on this
It's
point.
okay, because we're almost done. No, listen, the way these meetings work, I'm fine however you guys want to do it. You can interrupt me at any time, or we could go through the whole presentation. I'm so flexible, so I'm fine. I have another slide I'd like to share, Kevin. Just to quickly talk about what our success measures will be. These obviously are going to line up with our objectives. So you can see we have 5 success measures. I won't read the slide. You can see that we hope to increase funding, that we want to get our percentage of grantees, as we've talked about, to the communities in which they implement projects. And the language point, of course, is well articulated. More evidence-based approach using our M&E. Definitely better experiences with technology, and we'll always want to continue to communicate. So these are the things that we'll look at towards the end of 2022. So when we meet at this meeting next year, I'll have those. And the final one, no, that's okay, Kevin, go ahead, because I'll finish up quickly. So the final slide here for you is to look at the team. We right now have 10 people. We have 10 people when you look at both the program side and the operations side. And we have been working like crazy. I think that's probably pretty obvious, in a very joyful way. We have a lot of fun together. And as I mentioned in my last presentation, it's an amazing group of people with so much energy. And I am proud to have a team like this. But this team needs some help. If we are going to provide more funding, if we are going to do more monitoring and evaluation, if we are going to take up our communications, if we are going to improve our systems for everybody, if we're going to continue to be there for our grantees and build those communities, we need more people. So as you've seen in the budget, we're asking for a headcount increase of 5 people. The idea would be that we would hire them across the year, obviously not all 5 at once. That would be a little bit hard to do. But this is what the team would look like with those additional folks. And as I've talked about, it's not like this organization is ever going to be anything but a lean organization. But for right now, with the switch that we are proposing to make in 2022, we are asking for an additional headcount. Last slide, please. The budget's going to be the next thing up. So say we'll be talking about what the budget for Action Plan 2022 looks like. You've already had a preview because obviously it was part of what we were doing with the 5-year forecasting and then the 2030 planning. So we'll do that. But before we move into closed session to do that, I want to once again thank the board for your support, for your great ideas, for just being there for us. It's been a challenge, a fun challenge, but definitely a challenge. And I want you to all please just recognize the work that the team has done, how proud we all should be of the work that the foundation has done. And I must say that I feel every day so fortunate to be in this job. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, and take any additional questions.
Thank you very much. And as Sarah was just indicating, any non-budget questions at this point, right? Because we'll take the questions related to the budget during the closed session in which the budget will be presented. But are there any other general questions that didn't come up in the free-for-all a slide or two ago?
It's okay. Okay, Brian, thank you.
Okay, it looks like people are ready to move to the budget discussion, and that does cause us to change sessions. So we will thank the observers who have been watching us synchronously or asynchronously up to this point. There will be a pause while we go off and have that closed part of the meeting, and then we'll return with a number of resolutions into open session later. In the meantime, thank you for your attention, and we'll be back soon. Thanks, everyone. We're back in open session at this point, and there are a number of different resolutions for the board to consider. The first of these is resolved that the Internet Society Foundation Board approves the 2022 Foundation Action Plan and Budget as presented. May I ask for someone to move?
I'll move it.
I saw Robert and George second.
Fine.
Is there any discussion? May I ask folks to signify aye by raising their hand using the tool?
That's a good way of doing
Okay, I believe that's definitive. Luis, you have not raised your hand. Is there? Well, it looks like it just went away. Okay, maybe this is not the best way to do it. It looks like everybody has at this point raised their hand, so we can consider it unanimous. Thank you, everyone. The next is approve funding for resilience and responding to emergency. Resolved that the ISAC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $3,408,000 to fund the resiliency and responding to emergency RARE program using amounts from reserves. May I ask for someone to move? I see Luis and Pepper seconds. Once again, please signify assent by raising your hand in the tool. Thank you. Over time, I've seen everybody's hand, so even though they didn't all stay up at all times. So I believe we can once again call that unanimous consent. The next is approve funding for strengthening communities, improving lives and livelihoods skills. Resolved that the ISAC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $3,105,000 to fund the Strengthening Communities, Improving Lives and Livelihoods Skills program using remaining amounts from reserves. Any discussion on this point? Hearing no discussion, please signify assent by raising your hand in the tool. Okay, I believe that's unanimous consent. Thank you very much. The next is approve funding for research. Resolved that the ISOC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $3,622,500 to fund research programs using remaining amounts from reserves. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, please raise your hand in the tool to signify assent. Once again, we appear to have unanimous consent. Thank you very much. The next one is approve funding for Beyond the Net. Resolved that the ISOC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $293,000 to fund the Beyond the Net program using remaining amounts from reserves. Is there any discussion on this point? Could I get someone to move and second, please?
I'll move it.
Thank you, and Richard seconds. Please signify assent by raising your hand. Okay, I believe we once again have unanimous consent. Thank you. The next one is for the BOLT program resolution. Approve funding for these /levering technology. Resolved that the ISOC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $1,242,000 to fund the Building Opportunities Leveraging Technology BOLT program using remaining amounts from reserves. Is there any discussion on this point? May I ask someone to move and second? I saw Brian and Paul. Please signify assent by raising your hand in the tool. Thank you. We once again have unanimous consent. The next one is approve funding for opportunities. Resolved that the ISOC Foundation Board approves the expenditure of $255,000 from remaining reserves to fund opportunities, including sponsorships for global regional IGF and schools of internet governance. Is there any discussion on this point? Hearing no discussion, may I ask someone to move and second? I saw Laura and Luis. Please signify assent by raising your hand in the tool. Thank you. I believe we have unanimous consent. The next resolution is to approve the Executive Director's 10-year financial portfolio recommendation. Whereas the Board of Trustees, the Board of the Internet Society Foundation, the Foundation has reviewed the financial scenario planning and 10-year financial portfolio recommendations as presented by the Executive Director of the Foundation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the financial scenario planning and 10-year financial portfolio recommendations are approved. Are there any questions on this resolution? Pepper, you had a question. Okay. Would somebody move in second, please? Pepper was moving. I see. He was just moving very quickly, and Brian seconded very quickly. Thank you. If I could ask people to signify assent by raising their hand in the tool. Okay, I believe we have unanimous consent. Thank you very much. The next one is to approve the creation of a $50 million quasi-endowment for the foundation. This one is sort of complicated. Whereas the Board of the Foundation has reviewed different financial scenarios within which the foundation could potentially operate in the next 10 years as presented by the Executive Director, and whereas the Executive Director has recommended that the Board designate $50 million of the Foundation's current funds as a quasi-endowment to support the Foundation's long-term sustainability within the context of the different financial scenarios as presented. And whereas the board has determined that it is in the foundation's best interest to designate such funds as recommended to provide for a sustainable financial future for the foundation, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby designates $50 million as a quasi-endowment, the reserve quasi-endowment, with such $50 million corpus restricted from use without a unanimous resolution of the entire board to permit spending of the corpus, and further resolved that the reserve quasi-endowment shall be managed to provide for the long and short-term financial needs of the foundation to carry out its exempt purposes and to preserve the value of the reserve quasi-endowment's assets as set forth in these resolutions, and further resolved that the executive director is directed to develop, with the assistance of the foundation's financial advisors and in consultation with the president and CEO, an investment and spending policy for approval by the board of the foundation for the reserve quasi-endowment in furtherance of the purposes of the reserve quasi-endowment and consistent with these resolutions, and further resolve that the officers of the foundation are hereby authorized and empowered to take any and all actions that they or any of them may deem necessary or proper to effectuate the purpose of the foregoing resolution. Are there any questions on this resolution? Hearing no questions, may I ask someone to move? Mike, and second? John? May I ask you to signify assent by raising your hand in the tool? We have unanimous consent. Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there any other business for the good of the order? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
If you could close the recording now.